The 1950s, America and Korea were at war. The space race took off with the launch of Sputnik. The Cold War was heating up, and comic books came under fire. With the threat of nuclear attack came the concern of radiation and its effect on life. Fears of a communist invasion, technological advances, and creatures from beyond our moon spread across the country. But worry not, my friends, for you are safe in the spoiler room with the crew, so grab your favorite drink and pull up a chair as they discuss monster films from this decade in It Came from the 50s.
Yes, folks, It Came from the 50s is back once again. Our special series of episodes we're doing where we're covering monster films from the 50s. And man, do we have a classic for you tonight from 1954. And we're talking about them. No, not us. We're talking about them. And to discuss this very interesting, larger than life ant film, we have a great crew assembled with us tonight. First off, he's in the room once again. It's the BFD, Mr. Glenn Bittner. Hello, Glenn. How are you?
Hey, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad to have you here, and hope you don't have too many ants in your pants for this episode. So I had to work one ant pun in there. I apologize. We also have in the room tonight, he is in his house. It is Scotty D is back with us. Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Oh, glad to hear it. We're hanging in there. The knee's getting a little better, so that's always good. I can actually bend it now, which is fun. And yes, returning after his long hiatus to parts unknown, he is back with us, Jason Zolliger. Hello, Jason. How are you?
I am excellent and glad to be here. Glad to be back.
Glad to have you back in the spoiler room tonight, especially for this film called Them. Now, Jason, since you're here, would you like to give the synopsis of the movie Them?
Sure. It's it starts with New Mexico Police Department getting reports of strange attacks, and they investigate or try to figure out what's going on. And there's that whole first section of the movie where they're trying to figure out what's going on, and everybody knows because the big ants are on the poster. So it's like not really a mystery, but they play that angle up for a little while. Then the ants attack, and the FBI and the police attack back and destroy the ants, but they find out that there's two queens that are alive and escaped, and the rest of the movie is basically tracking them down and making sure they're destroyed. And they were created, the giant ants were created by leftover radiation from the atomic bomb tests in New Mexico. So
wait, we have a 50s giant monster film and radiation's involved?
Yes.
No way! That's so unusual.
It's like it's like they say about booze. It's the cause of and solution to all of our problems. That was radiation in the 50s.
Radiation, yes.
If it wasn't from our own produced radiation, it was from space. Something in space did not like us, came down and decided to be mean to us. Either way, the 50s didn't like radiation or those folks from outer space. Space was scary and radiation bad, which, at least they got it half right. Though I guess space can be scary. Them. Glenn, do you remember when you first watched the giant ant film?
I remember when I first saw the whole movie. That was last week.
Seriously?
Really?
I should say. I'm saying the first time I saw the whole movie in a single sitting.
Ah, okay.
So I have always caught this one like on TBS or some other station when I was a kid. I'd catch it like 20 or 30 minutes in, or I'd catch the beginning of it and then we'd have to go to church, or I'd get the middle of it and then I'd go out and play whatever with my friends. So I had seen the whole movie many times, but I had never just sat down and popped in them and said I'm going to watch them. Until last week. But I mean, it played enough times in my head, and just me seeing bits of it, that I reenacted stuff from this movie with my G.I. Joe figures, and with my Star Wars guys, and with my Army men, and every other thing that I could possibly have go to war against giant bugs. So,
well, this is considered the first giant bug film, I do believe, that we ever got, the like major bug film. Would you say, Scotty D, or am I wrong on that?
I wouldn't really know for sure. I don't want to check the dates, but I do know that this one was coming out, was probably one of the first, if not the first, it was probably one of the first to come out. And we got to remember that all of these pretty much came out within 5 years of each other. You know, Earth versus the Spider, Tarantula, stuff like that. All probably came in a very, very close time, you know, with doing the giant insects or animals or whatever thing. Bird-Eye Gordon made an entire career just doing nothing but that. So,
and this is brought to us by the director Gordon Douglas, who gave us In Like Flint. He directed as well, so you know he can handle comedy, but this is a pretty serious film.
It's a very serious. The thing about Gordon Douglas is, I think that I was looking at his credits and I'm like, okay, this is kind of odd. He's got a lot of really good like detective movies and kind of cool hip movies, and then like right at the beginning or somewhere, well, not at the beginning, I guess, but right in the middle, it's Them. I mean, which is really, it's a really like black and white serious movie. Despite the subject matter, this is one serious flick.
It is. It definitely serious. Jason, how about you with Them? You remember when you first saw this film?
I would say my experience is very similar to Glenn's, where I'd seen the movie enough in pieces as a kid to kind of know what it was about and have a general idea. But yeah, I'm not certain. Memory does not work that well. But if I ever did see the thing from beginning to end as a kid, but so yeah, I watched it for the first time all the way through a couple days ago, and remembered parts of it and not other parts of it. But so yeah, it was actually it was fun to revisit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and would you agree that this is, I mean, because we've had you could tell the monster films that are kind of campy in this, but this one is fairly serious.
Yeah, I do think though that it strikes a nice balance between being very grim and serious in certain places, but also having a few lighter moments and goofy things, not to the detriment of the overall tone, but there's definitely some funny spots. Particularly, I like the when the doctor, Dr. Harold Medford, is in the helicopter and they want him to use the headset, and they're telling him to say over, and I already said over, and he's get this whole kind of little bit with the headset I thought was pretty funny, and there's a few other small bits that are funny, but it's I think Scott mentioned that the director did mysteries. Well, there's actually kind of two bits in this where it is a mystery. The first is, hey, what are these things that are doing these attacks? And then the second is, okay, where did these queens go? And we got to track them down. And there's a lot of mystery elements in the movie. And then, of course, the action, the monster action. So I think it's a real nice balance between, those things that I just mentioned.
Well, I think it surprises some people, a film like this, because you go into it, you're thinking, giant tarantula and that, but you look at this going, well, you know what? This was a fairly big film back in the day for the people they had, because the person you mentioned, Dr. Harold Medford, that's Santa.
Yeah.
That's Santa from Miracle on 34th Street.
And they got Matt Dillon.
And they got Matt Dillon in here. James Whitmore, James,
and the Miracle Grow guy.
Yeah, the Miracle Grow guy. That's the big name one. That's the one everybody recognizes. Scotty D, do you remember when you first caught this film fully?
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a similar story to some of the other movies that we covered here. It was on Channel 29 in Philadelphia, Theater Bazaar, matinee during the weekend when they would always show the matinee scary movies on Saturdays and Sundays. And one of them was Them. And I thought, okay, I can watch this. It's just going to be like a regular thing. And it's like this starts out, it's really creepy, it's really ominous. And it has, and then finally that little girl just yells out, Them! Them! And I'm like, dude, this is a really tight movie. It was that movie. It had me hooked right from when I was a kid. I said, this is not this. I thought giant ants. This thing is going to be hilarious. This thing isn't playing around. This is a really intense movie. So I've actually enjoyed this one ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, because you get the little girl wandering the desert, and they pick her up, and she doesn't talk at first, and you got a trailer ripped open, and they got that ant noise, but you never actually see the ants, even though like Jason said, it's on the poster. You know they're coming,
right? But I'll tell you something. That early scene also, and I've thought this I've thought this kind of ever since the other movie came out. Which you also did a episode of Spoiler Room about, in the movie Tremors, when they first uncover the place that's been wrecked, and there's parts that have been buried, and the car was buried, and everything like that, which is like the best eerie scene in that movie, and that whole setup, and then townspeople get together, and there's all that. I always looked at that. I said, these people have seen Them.
Yep.
Because obviously Tremors is paying homage to a lot of these old movies, but just in the structure of the film, it's got a lot. It really owes a lot to Them, and so these early scenes where they're coming across the wreckage here and trying to figure out what's going on, it's really eerie and creepy, and it really strikes that chord, and that I think has been. Would inspire those future filmmakers there.
Yeah, you could see influence, and it's another sci-fi film that you can see influence later on in other films, especially other monster films. They built a lot from this because you do have a lot of anticipation. We don't see the ants, I think, for the first half hour. So it is this kind of bizarre mystery, but we've got some brutal deaths in here. I like the one line that the one guy says is like, everything here points to a homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that, Glenn, the mystery part in the beginning? You think, even though they know the ants are on the poster, you think they still played off pretty good, building up that anticipation? No pun intended.
I don't know where he gets his homeless.
Sorry, I love that. That was a good pun.
Yeah. The whole notion that the homicidal maniac who can rip open the sides of trailers and buildings. I mean, what homicide? This is. I mean, yeah, maybe a homicidal maniac, elephant.
Well, they do drop the line, though. It is near an insane asylum, and I'm just like, wow, you guys are really drawing some. I'm like, what kind of crazy person's knocking holes through buildings?
Yeah.
But I do like the cop. What do you think of James Whitmore's character in this, though, Glenn? His Sergeant Ben Peterson.
He's fine. I mean, in a lot of ways, he's a very typical, 1950s guy.
The veteran cop, because you get him and the young cop, and then he has guilt because the young cop becomes ant food, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like his character. You're right. He is kind of written basic 50s cop guy, but James Whitmore, I think, plays him fairly well. Jason, what do you think of James Whitmore's Ben Peterson?
Yeah, I would say he was all right. It wasn't. There were times where I'm watching him on screen and I'm like, dude, show some emotion or do something. He just seemed kind of. But all in all, I mean, it was all right.
Well, he was concerned about his height with next to James Arness.
Little trivia that on IMDb or wherever it was that he wore lifts in his shoes because of the height difference. So,
Scotty D, what'd you think of our Ben Peterson? Did he need to show some more emotion?
He wasn't bad, but I mean, he didn't exactly shiver me timbers either. Just like the rest of our crew, there was kind of an arc. Already, there was building an archetype of the type of hero you could expect in a movie like this, and you would either get someone who was a by the book, very stern and stoic scientist, or you would get somebody who is kind of a chiseled jaw, small town crime fighter who is also very stoic and everything. Basically, just like all these really serious white guys running around these movies. And that's kind of what you got. That's why I think it was such a relief to have the Doctor who had the issue with the CV radio. And I was like, dude, I'm totally on this guy's side with the CV radio. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I liked. I mean, even though she did kind of become the, standard woman in a thing, I liked that the woman was a doctor, not a nurse, a doctor.
Yeah.
But you got the standard. But yeah, our main. I'm sorry, I'm getting beside the point. Our main guy. Yeah, he was he was serious, stoic, chiseled, and white. So he fit the mold of this movie. So.
In contrast, you had James Arness, who at least showed a little emotion, but he was almost Mr. Too Suave. It's like you had Mr. Stiff Pants, and then you had Mr. James Arness playing the FBI agent, which it's actually, I think, because of this film that he ended up being becoming famous in his favorite TV show, because I think John Wayne saw him in this movie and wanted him in
Gunsmoke.
Yeah,
great show.
Yeah, a lot of people love that show. But I'm glad you brought up the Doctor, played by Joan Weldon, because for most of this film, she's written as this kind of no nonsense. She understands she's in a man's world, but takes no crap type of character, which I really liked. Scott, did you like her character for the most part, the way she was written?
You're not going to get some. It's like not to repeat myself too much, but it's you're not going to get the. No. I'm just saying with how I was like kind of harping on what you got in the 50s. I'm just saying that you're not going to get the woman of the world that's that the well-rounded character that, well, let's face it, we're just now starting to get movies that kind of have that part in it.
Right.
It's probably to the point of where we think we're getting it because we haven't had anything like that before, and we're going to look at the parts that women have today 20 years from now and say, yikes. That was not as progressive as we thought, because my point being, we still got a long way to go, and you're still going to have things. But just to have the woman that had a brain, yes, she fell into some of the stereotypes, but they made it a very big point that it wasn't all nepotism. It wasn't a thing. No, she was a doctor as well. She had a brain. She had a good head on her shoulders. And she was going to be helping these people, even though they kept saying, no, you stay behind. She was going to be front and center fighting the giant ants. So, yeah.
Yeah, she was. Because she was actually interesting. She was the more serious doctor, whereas her father was more of kind of the bubbling professor.
Mm-hmm. She had the... both were intelligent, but she had the intelligence as well as... But the husband rather father. What kind of movie is this? The father was the father was also kind of to borrow a line from another movie of the 50s, was sort of an absent-minded professor.
Yes,
and she actually had had the brains about the subject and some street smarts as well. So it was a kind of a nice switch to see that she was the one that had kind of most of the gifts there.
Yeah, she was a bit no nonsense, even dealing with characters around her who would say things like, "Oh, she's a doctor. I think I'll get a fever real quick." I'm like, "Oh my God, dude."
She probably had to hear that all the time.
Jason, how about you with the Patricia Medford character? Did you like kind of how she was written? I mean, for a 50s movie, was it kind of surprising?
Right. I think that caveat needs to go on it, right? For a 50s movie. Yeah, it was. I thought it was a fairly well written character that, you know, wasn't one dimensional, wasn't the damsel in distress always. You know, she was actually giving orders when they were down, when they put the gas in the first anthill or whatever, and they're going down there, and she's checking things out, and she sees the queen's eggs hatched or whatever, and she's like, okay, we got what we need here. You know, I think then she's giving orders, burn everything or do everything, and takes off. You know, she's actually giving orders.
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, I'm going to tag along while men, do your thing down here. Now, yeah, it wasn't maybe feminist to today's standards or what we would hope, but yeah, I thought it was a good character.
Yeah, and she doesn't become the cliche love interest either, does she, Glenn? Our Patricia Medford, they pretty keep her straight for most of the film, at least. Not the standard love interest. How'd you feel about Patricia?
I liked her. I did. As some people have already mentioned, I like the fact that she's just like, hey, I'm the scientist here. You have any idea what you're looking for? Well, then as men, we can protect you. Shut up, and I'm going in the hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked her character.
Yeah, I did too, and it was kind of a surprise, especially, here we have actually a monster genre film that is writing characters that are a little bit different than what you'd seen in other films during that time period. Go genre films, trying to at least break the mold a little bit. But we did allude to it that there are actually kind of two stories here within this film, and they actually take a rather intelligent approach the first time, don't they, Jason, with these ants? I mean, compared to what you've seen in other monster or horror films, especially for the time, they actually kind of take a logical approach, and what they come up with almost works, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very, and the whole film is with the mystery, parts of it, and how they deal with the threat is all very logical and makes sense, and they're not doing stupid things, and they're not going off half cocked all the time, and they're pretty much doing what makes sense, and which is why kind of in the end, at the final battle, when they find the final one, that could have been pretty cut and dried, but then you get the kids that cause that additional wrinkle, that complicate things and heighten the tension, but then again, they handle that fairly, logically, and so it was, I actually kind of like the plot and the way everything played out.
Yeah, they don't take your normal kind of tropish, you don't have the one person going, haha, I'm the hero and everyone else just falls in line. They all kind of work together in this, and it was kind of refreshing to watch. Glenn, would you agree that they actually do make, for the most part, intelligent decisions in this versus many other horror films?
Yeah, they do. They don't just say, hey, let's just charge in and do everything stupid. I mean, they make plans, they follow through on plans. No, I think they do a really good job on a lot of that.
And adding to the mystery part, they actually do some investigation, like the crazy guy in the asylum who says he sees ants. Scott, did you like kind of the mystery?
Make me a sergeant.
Yeah, make me a sergeant. Scott, did you kind of like the mystery angle they took with they actually show these people doing a little more investigation rather than just, oh, yep, we know what they're like, we're just going to go do this.
Well, yeah, I think what was made it kind of interesting is that if it was most movies of the era, there'd be one of two things. No one would believe it until the moment when the giant ants just like showed up at the city limits.
Right.
And started and no one could ignore it. Or even dumber, they would believe it right away. They'd say like, wait, I think I found this over here. That's an antenna. Obviously giant ants. They didn't do that either. They almost did I think Jason was bringing up how the mystery aspect of the film, they almost brought up kind of almost like a procedural thing, except instead of leading to, a murderer, it led to giant radioactive ants. And so, I mean, which would have been like the best episode of Law and Order ever. But I like that they actually go through, and it's, again, going to the doctors and everything, it's science-based, where they actually kind of try to figure it, and people are still like, this just seems way too weird. And towards the end where they actually have martial law and they're saying like, look, I know this is hard to believe, just trust us on this. Everybody's it made what is an innately silly movie. So much is done to make it seem oddly plausible for the time that you're spent watching it, that it works.
Yeah, I agree. They make it plausible. I mean, even the boat scene, you think about ants on a boat, you're like, oh, ha, but that's actually kind of a creepy scene where they're talking on the radio and you see the ants because one of the queens landed on a boat. And I'm like, oh, this kind of feels like Godzilla. Where's Godzilla now to eat the ants? But even that part, which would seem normally silly, actually comes off kind of serious. I mean, this film feels like they were kind of trying to make a legit horror film. And I think it works well for the most part. They pull it off. Even the ants. I mean, them ants for this type of film. Jason, what'd you think of the ants in this?
They were pretty good. I mean, obviously you gotta consider the time period. So, I mean, if you can get past them, I think them. Yeah, there's some pretty kind of chilling things in here. I mean, to me, that opening sequence really draws you in, and the little girl with the doll with the broken head and the blank look on her face walking through the desert. I mean, man, if you're not drawn in immediately by that, I mean, there's, I think that's a really effective opening. But so the ants, okay, they look kind of cheesy, but then there's that one scene where there's the ant kind of on top of the hill and he's got the rib cage in his mandibles, and then the rib cage falls and it tumbles down and there's all these other bones, and you see the belt from the policeman and the gun, and it's just like, to me, that was like, wow, that's really effective, even though there's this giant, kind of goofy looking ant. It's still kind of creepy and pretty effective.
Yeah, I found the ants scary for 1954. Glenn, how about you? Do you think, especially for 1954, these were decent, scary creatures?
I think so. For when this was made, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, could you imagine yourself in 1954 seeing it for the first time?
How old do you think I am?
No, I said imagine. I didn't say you were actually there.
He was only 6 in 1954. Come
on, man.
I was not saying that at all. God damn it. Damn you, Glenn.
It's so easy to rattle you.
It is. I know. I'm like a baby rattle, but Scotty D, how about you? You think these are scary ants?
Yeah. I mean, I think that these monsters hold up a lot better than a lot of the other monsters of the day. You know, it might help that they had some studio money, even if it wasn't a huge budget. I think that, I mean, I'm kind of a weird guy where, if something looks too good, I almost think it looks too polished, and I don't find it scary. Watching this as a kid in the 80s, I thought the ants were scary. Watching them today, still kind of think the ants were scary. And if I was watching this in the 50s, I think I would have crapped my pants at that point because these things were really effective, I thought. And they do a lot with them.
Yeah, they play with the camera angles and that, but they do a lot with them, especially when you get into that third act where they're going through the sewers. And you have the one ant because he's saving the kids, and the one ant grabs our doctor. Our sergeant Ben Peterson, and bites him. That part's actually I'm like, wow, this is kind of brutal. Actually.
Oh, it's a really brutal moment, and I think these ants look better than say like the one that everybody raved about 30 years ago in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah.
I remember that, like, oh, that amazing ant effects, and yeah, it was pretty good for that time. But like, you compare that to them, it's like they're kind of the same, you know.
Yeah, they are kind of the same. But this film has some legit, kind of brutal and scary, dark moments, and I think it's well crafted in general. Now, we have here the common theme of nukes. Of course, because the first testing was just 9 years before when this film took place. So, Glenn, is this another 50s film warning us about the evils of, or us paying for the sins of our past?
Well, of course. I mean, especially when you look at what the last line is, where it's pretty much, "Oh, man's a bad thing, and they make bad things, and look what we did. We fucked up." And we're just going to keep doing it because that's what we do.
Right.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Humans are bad. Jason, how about you? Do you think their message is effective in here for their hey, look how we screwed up the world with their nukes?
Well, yeah, and you get that message, I think, in a lot of movies of the time. But one of the things I was going to say about the end was that, okay, the ants are, scary and meant to be scary through the entire film. But man, that last scene with the ants, is it just me or I mean, did you not sympathize with those ants stuck down in the hole, like looking helpless and all, can't get out, and it's just, burn them, and then they just get, I felt like, oh man, it's like here they are, these helpless little creatures, and they got them trapped, these last queens, and they're just gonna wipe them out. And I don't, maybe I don't know, maybe I just had a weird moment, but maybe nobody thinks that, yeah, they got them. Everybody thinks that, but I was like, oh man, I don't know. There's something about that last scene just struck me. When they're all these soldiers just kind of looking down in that hole, and their ants are sitting there not doing anything, and it's just like, oh, is this are we okay? Can we go ahead and burn them? And the doctor's like, yep, that'll be fine. And the general or whatever goes, okay, burn them. And then they just burn them, and that's pretty much the end of the movie.
Right. Well, I think you're hitting
Seems
on a
like we got ourselves an ant sympathizer here.
You're an ant sympathizer, huh? What kind of books are you reading, Jason?
Maybe it's just me. Yeah, I don't know.
Little Marxist ant there. Huh? You a commie now? No, I actually think you're hitting on a good point. Scotty D, what do you think? At the end here, the tables do turn. Suddenly our humans, with probably one of the more brutal weapons of World War II, the flamethrower, are setting fire to these ants that literally were just born. What do you think? You think they were maybe going for that man is almost scarier than these radioactive ants?
Well, they achieved it, whether they were going for it or not.
Sure.
That's the big question, isn't it? It's like, okay, are we actually making a social commentary here, or do we kind of accidentally luck into it?
Mhm.
Which we don't know now. Looking at this now, more than 60 years later, we can't really say for sure. But they did achieve it because, I mean, let's face it, these ants they have to be destroyed. They're terrible. They've murdered. They've fed on people. They're absolutely a terrifying menace. But are they actually evil? Well, no. They don't. They're not evil. They don't have a big plot to take over the world. Ants have a certain way of operating. They have a certain instinct, and if you make them, several thousand times their actual size, they're going to look for different parts of the food chain to exploit. But it's all it's that nature itself is very, very brutal. And yes, and it's basically, whoever is the top of the food chain, it's basically for dominance of that, and that can be really cold and unfeeling. Whether they meant to actually say that, well, that's who can say.
Right? It may have been a little bit, rah, rah, hey, look at our soldiers defending us.
I think this does have a little. I will say that even though you can't say for sure, I will say that this felt like it had a little bit more of a brain and a social conscience than some of the other movies. But again, you can't say for sure.
No, you can't say for sure. But though, what is interesting with a bit of trivia, we're talking about the flamethrowers. Those were actual World War II flamethrowers, and yes, those were actual World War II veterans handling the flamethrowers. Because this was, only 9 years out, probably when they were filming it, from World War II. So, yeah, those were actual World War II flamethrowers, which kind of makes it all the more scary.
well, and I don't know if you noticed, but it seemed like there was a lot of shots of the flamethrowers, throwing flames right directly into the camera. Well, the movie was originally meant to be in 3D, so I think that's part of the that would have been a part of the 3D effects that they were going for.
Which, if you think about old school filmmaking, I want to know who drew the short straw to run the camera that sits in front of the flamethrower. But yeah, you're right. It was intended for 3D and color, but they chose against it at last minute. I do believe, if I read that correctly, that they chose not to. After all, I think it was because of expense. I'm not sure the exact.
I had read something that there was a problem with the camera in the beginning, and then they decided, screw it, we'll just go black and white.
We'll do it in 2D. That's why the title, though, they kept in color. It's the weirdest movie because it opens with a title that's in color that was meant to be 3D, and it's in 2D black and white.
It's kind of funny because, they would use any little bit of color. If this was a B movie, any little bit of color they would put on as a they would put that as the big selling point of the movie. Right. There was, William Castle did it. I mentioned Bird Eye Gordon before. He did it. Just like there's a couple seconds of color in this, and it's this new effect and everything like that. This one just said, no, there's no effects, there's no nothing, but we'll just surprise them and throw the color and the title in color there.
Yeah, it does appear that it was because of budget. The studio was nervous because they're making a genre film, and if you look at the people and what they put behind it, it actually had budget for a 1954 film. They cut the budget, so they had to go back to black and white, and not in 3D, because they just didn't have confidence in that weird genre, of monster films, I guess. But yeah, you can see why this is a classic film, though, because it is serious. It's not as campy as the other films, and this cast, I mean, this would have probably, Glenn, wouldn't you say this was probably a big event film for the day with the names that were in this film?
What was that?
Would you say that this was would be considered kind of a big event film for the time, considering the names and the studio and the budget behind it.
I would say so.
Yeah. It not maybe Infinity War size, but because there were other genre movies at that time, but it just has that feel like they were trying to make something like, this is actually a serious type of film versus some of your other films like, The Giant Claw or The Crab Monsters. Along those lines. So
I'll tell you, Attack of the Crab Monsters, when you watch that movie, it is so weird. It is creepy. They are obviously papier-mâché crabs, but I mean, there are weird parts to that movie. There is a part where they figure out that the crabs eat people and then can communicate with their voices, so that you have crabs using their thoughts and their voices because they have their mind power. The place that they have is being eaten away because every night the crabs are whacking away at the island and setting pieces of it into the sea so that they have less to do. There's that wonderful scene when apparently they can like broadcast on any kind of metal, so they are actually getting transmissions from the crabs via a gun. It was like, what the hell? This movie is so weird.
I was sold at telepathic papier-mâché crabs.
Oh, it's great. You got to see this.
Yeah, I have to. It's on the list right now. I just put it on.
Maybe we'll have to cover that film sometime, just so that everybody could go in and watch it. Yeah, and I like the way this film was shot for 1954. I thought they did really good keeping some things in the dark and not showing your full ant, though they only made 3 ants. That's why we only ever see 3 ants. Though we do get the one kid. And I don't know if you guys noticed this. Scott, did you notice the one kid? I don't know if he was like one of the actors' sons or nephews or something, because he's just standing there. There's supposed to be a big gigantic ant coming at him. And Scott, what's he doing? Did you notice?
He's not becoming the next Jonathan Lipnicki, I'll tell you that. He's making his one and done status pretty much known. And I have not checked the IMDb credits, so if this kid somehow actually has 20 or 30 credits, I will take the foot out of my mouth and just be stunned. But yeah, it's there. Every now and then in these movies, you get like the kid gets on the screen, and the kid just they tell him just the kid to react. If you tell the kid to react, he might go overboard. If you tell him just to stand there, he's just going to stand there. And I think that's all that they got.
I could just hear the director coming from the camera. It's a big giant ant coming at you, and he's just standing there going, "Yeah, whatever."
God, it's coming right for us.
Typical kids today. Typical kids today. I've seen. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, we've seen it all. I'm 13. I've seen everything at this point. Like big giant ant. Oh, you're into those now? I was into those a few years ago. Yeah, I'm into grasshoppers right now. You probably haven't heard of them, that kind of thing. So.
Just standing there, and his brother or whatever is supposed to be. That kid's like, he's just selling the hell out of it. He's like, oh my god, and the kid's standing there like, what are you screaming at?
I think in that first shot, that one kid's literally crying. I mean, he's just really all over. Yeah, and the other one's sitting over in the corner. Yeah, whatever.
Like, dude, what's your problem?
This is not the time to just play it cool.
So yeah, I had to mention that just because I got such a kick out of that kid. I was just watching him going, wow, man, you really were like last minute casting, weren't you? You were literally the grip boy or somebody, and they're just like, crap, we need another kid here. Hey, get over here. And for those of you who pay attention and who are Lucasfilm fans, you will recognize a sound effect in this film used many, many times. Glenn, you know which one I'm talking about? The Wilhelm
Oh yeah.
used many times in this film.
I
Though this
counted at least 3.
Yeah. It's in here at least a few times, though it's not the original film because it came from a different film, I think 2 years before that. I forgot the origin of the Wilhelm, but it's used quite often in this movie, which I kind of chuckled at. Like, hey, you could do a drinking game. Every time you hear a Wilhelm, take a shot. There you go. Make it a lot more fun.
I still think it's kind of funny that some films are still using it, and it's hard to find the exact moment when people stopped using it because it was convenient and started using it as kind of like a joking kind of salute. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, to pinpoint that moment in time, would be something. But yeah, I mean, it's just God. Yeah, it's I counted at least 3, and I was looking up as well and saying, like, was this the first? No, this wasn't the first. Goes back even further.
Actually, according to IMDb, it's heard 4 times
See?
throughout the film. So you did miss one,
Oh.
but it isn't from this film, the Wilhelm scream. That came from a film, I think, a few years earlier. So
I'm doing some searching right now as we're talking, and first thing that comes up on the Wikipedia, Google, thank you, is beginning in 1951 for the film Distant Drums. It's probably the only thing Distant Drums is remembered for. It's like, well, it's probably, I don't know what it would. I mean, I will have to take a look here. Distant Drums. Let's take a look what this movie was. It was a Gary Cooper movie, but let's face it, this isn't. And okay, there we go. The enduring legacy. This is a quote from Wikipedia. So don't let them tell you we don't do actual, honest to God, research. And I'm sure all of the stuff on Wikipedia is true.
of course,
It
sure.
says, quote, the enduring legacy of this movie, meaning Distant Drums, is the earliest known use of the Wilhelm scream sound effect, originally used to vocalize a character being bitten by an alligator. So that's good. If you can imagine, like, every time you hear it, with the ant or with, like, a stormtrooper and it's somebody falling, just imagine that, oh my God, and on top of everything, he was bitten by an alligator.
Oh crap! Now I want a compilation where you just CGI an alligator in on anyone who falls
Yeah.
over with the
Do
Wilhelm
it.
scream.
Do it.
It'd be
Well,
so fitting.
So if we mentioned briefly Star Wars, I think we have to also mention the Star Trek reference in the film with Leonard Nimoy, early appearance by Leonard Nimoy. I knew he was in the film,
Mhm.
watched it through, had no freaking clue who he was, and I went back and I'm like, okay, shoot, I got
He was ant number 2.
He was ant number 2.
And no, I love his line, real TS or real TS stuff, top secret.
Yeah, that's his whole line. He has.
Well, he's got a couple, but that's the best one.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I actually had to look it up and then find an image, and it's like, oh, okay, it's that guy.
No,
And then you watch it again, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can see it now, but I wasn't looking for it and totally missed it.
No, he didn't quite have his character, his telltale look yet. He was rather young for this movie. So
Yeah.
Well, he used to. Well, he. It was kind of always the funny thing was that he really struggled to make it in Hollywood, where Shatner, it just kind of happened right away, which is kind of like always like a joke they pulled with each other. But he did a lot of genre stuff before he ever did Star Trek. And I mean, I this is like one of 2 early Nimoy films I just saw within the last month, because I also finally caught The Brain Eaters from like a few years later, where he has a bigger part in that one.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, oh, look at that, more Nimoy.
Yeah, his early films, he has a lot of uncredited, where people don't really, they wouldn't recognize him, and back then until the Big Trek, I guess. Well, that and was it The Man from U.N.C.L.E., but that was later, I think.
No, Mission Impossible.
Or Mission Impossible. I'm sorry. He did make an
No.
appearance in Man from U.N.C.L.E., but yeah,
He was
Mission
on. Yes, he
Impossible.
was on A Man from U.N.C.L.E., but
He was in a lot of TV.
he did a ton of TV. He was, and God, he did a lot of westerns, and I think because of his kind of stern look that he has, I think they kind of cast him as a lot of in a lot of like Native American roles, which is kind of like, oh, but
Hey man, it's the
but
50s.
Again, yeah, you kind of have to like take it into account. Interesting to note, he was also on quite a few episodes of Gunsmoke.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, see, we come full circle again.
We've
Here.
come full circle. So I think we'll wrap it up tonight on Them, a classic film that I think many people who are looking for some fun, but yet not quite so campy monster films should check out. So we're going to go down like we normally do with our special, and I'm going to ask my guests here one thing that they learned from Them from 1954. So Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot. We'll start off with you. Name one thing. It could be anything, humorous, whatever. Name one thing that Them taught you from 1954.
That when you're on a headset with somebody and you're done saying what you got to say, you say over.
Nice. I like that one. Yeah, it's good. That's a good lesson to learn. Definitely. Scotty D, how about you?
If you want to avoid radioactive ants, never go picnicking in New Jersey.
Glenn, how about you?
Please stop my nerves.
Make me a sergeant. Give me the booze. Make me a sergeant. Give me the booze.
If I ever did, try to run for any kind of office, I think that probably would be my slogan.
Make me a sergeant, give me the booze, or whatever you're running for.
These days, I'd probably win.
Make me a governor, give me the booze. You probably would nowadays. Oh, yeah. And one thing I learned from Them from 1954 is if you are faced with taking on a radioactive ant that's 6-7 feet tall, go for the antenna. Shoot the antenna. You'll make it blind. That's it won't be able to find you then, and you'll be safe. So make sure you shoot for the antenna, folks. And that's about do it for us tonight here on the Spoiler Room. Hope you enjoyed it. Another It Came from the 50s episode. Now here's the point where my wonderful guests can shield themselves and tell you where they can find them at when they're not here. So Jason, do you got anything you want to plug? Are we going to see another sequel to your film anytime soon?
Well, you'll hear it here first if I've got news. Right now, no. So I'll just say, always listen to the Spoiler Room, and every once in a while you'll get me.
Thank you. And we're happy to have you back in here, and hope we can get you in for some more episodes again.
Thank you.
Scotty D, where can they find you at?
Well, lots of old stuff right now because I haven't really written anything in a while. I hope to change that eventually. But you can catch my writings at movieocrity.com, or you can also check out my old web series. It's on YouTube, but best to go to Vimeo to check out all the episodes. That's at vimeo.com/channels/movieocrity.
Awesome. And Glenn, the BFD, where can we find you, sir?
Oh boy, you can find me on YouTube with the currently on hiatus B-Movie Bunker and Guyana Bunker Productions. Find me on Facebook with the same thing. You can check out my gaming podcast, Adventure Party, that I do with the wonderful Brad Ludwig on gncast.com, or just follow me on Twitter at Guyana Bunker.
Awesome stuff, gentlemen. Well, thank you this evening for talking this old film. It was fun to revisit it. It's been a long time since I watched it, and I'm glad we did. This was a fun movie, though. Just another point, folks. It does mention SS Milwaukee. Yay, Wisconsin reference, though there wasn't actually an SS Milwaukee, I think, at the time the film was made. So it was foreshadowing. That's all it was. It was foreshadowing. So thank you, everyone, for listening in. And now we'll just say good night, gentlemen.
Good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Good night. Hey, all my Spoiler Room friends out there, if you like what you hear, why not head on over to iTunes and like, comment, and even subscribe to our channel. It always helps us out. Or you can find us on Stitcher Radio as well. You can drop us a tweet on the Twitter at Spoiler Room PDCS or Special Mark Pro. Look for us also on Facebook at the Spoiler Room Podcast or in the Special Mark Productions Facebook group. Let us know what movies or topics you'd like to be discussed in the Spoiler Room, where the conversation is fresh, but we do spoil the movies.